I can get this going here. Fuck. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod, live to talk to you about MSU recruiting again. Things are heating up a lot, and there's a lot going on with the high school recruiting with the MSU staff. So, kind of a lot of high-profile recruits coming in at Miss East Lansing, and we want to have a bunch of things we want you to think about. There's a lot to be excited about the trajectory of next year's class, I think. Of course, as you probably know, Carlos Medlock Jr. was the first to commit for the 2026 class. And the point guard stock has done nothing. Well, I guess done exactly as you predicted, Rod. It has risen significantly, and I think there's every reason to think it's going to be even more so after this high school season. We'll talk about the others, unless you want to add anything with Carlos. Just accept the
Well,
fact that obviously,
we'll get to him
yeah.
as
Well, I was
we
going to start open with
we
him
move
because
through it.
he's coming the September 5th, which is grind week, and
Yep.
just to mention, he's already committed. So yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything else, and then we'll just kind of go through all the new people that have not committed at this point.
Well, we'll talk about Carlos a little bit more when we're moving through this in the order of the visits.
Chronologically, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No problem. All right. So move on to the next one. And so the first one up is going to be Julius Avent. He's a 6'7" power forward from New Jersey. He's going to be visiting in just the end of this month, August 30th.
Yeah. As you say, from New Jersey, uh, had a really good um, spring and summer for his EYBL program. Um, he was on a team with three guys who are considered to be high level recruits. Two of them are twins. They're the sons of former Detroit Piston Theo Ratliff, and
Hmm.
then there was another kid named Mingo who was a highly regarded point guard, actually, who's we've talked about or will be talking about rather when we preview Penn State because his older brother is going to be a freshman at Penn State this year. But anyway, he was on a team, PSA Cardinals, who had all three of those guys miss a lot of time. And I think in the case of the Ratliffs, it might have been the whole season. So a lot was on Julius's shoulders, and he really responded. He averaged 18.2 points a game on 47, 38, 90 shooting in EYBL, also averaged almost 5 boards a game. So that's really good production all the way around. You've got the counting stats that are good, and then he was efficient.
Yeah.
He's number 72 in the consensus. The numbers I'm going to use are the current consensus rankings, which will likely shift. I don't know that all of the recruiting indexes have updated their final post summer
Hmm.
rankings yet, but where it currently sits, he's at number 72. So he's highly regarded. He will also, in addition to visiting Michigan State, will visit Penn State, Providence, Xavier, and Seton Hall. Now, this is also a guy it's worth mentioning. He's got some bloodlines. His dad is a guy named Anthony Avent, who was a longtime NBA player. He went to Seton Hall. So
Okay.
the sense seems to be Seton Hall is the biggest threat to Michigan State. If you look at that list, no offense to Penn State, Providence, and Xavier, but you would expect Michigan State to win head-to-head recruiting battles, all else being equal, most of the time against those
Sure.
schools. You would also include Seton Hall in that category, but for this circumstance where you've got a father who was an alum. So he grew up around and he lives in New Jersey. So he grew up around the program to some extent. So it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out. I think that Michigan State, and it's true of most of these guys we're going to talk about. This is a really interesting. Maybe I should have let off with this, but I'll say it now that we're early in our program. This is a really interesting year, and in my view, unlike any previous recruiting season I can ever remember in the Tom Izzo era, and probably going back to Judd. And here's what I mean. Almost all of these guys, and I guess I'd have to look through the whole list. It might be, in fact, all of them. I don't think anybody on this list had an MSU offer prior to this spring.
Right. Yeah,
So
because
we
we haven't talked about these guys, I think, last
that's
year, I
right.
think.
We did a
Yeah.
recruiting episode what in late
I feel,
April, early May,
yeah. Yeah, I don't think any of
and
these guys were on
very
the
few
list,
of the
really.
names we talked about are here, and vice versa. Obviously, the names that we did talk about aren't on this list. So it's been interesting in that sense. We know that in recent years, and it's largely out of necessity, Michigan State has had to broaden their recruiting focus from a geographic standpoint, right? Um,
Yeah.
they're no longer beholden to just Michigan and the upper Midwest. And in fact, there's very little of that in this list
Yeah.
we're going to go through. The one guy they've gotten, of course, but beyond Carlos Medlock, there's no other upper Midwest kid or Michigan kid that has an offer. And it doesn't look like
Right.
that's likely to change. So interesting from that perspective. But I think the more interesting part than because we've seen Michigan State broaden their geographic approach in recent years. That's not brand new. That's been really the last 4 years or so, I would say, really post COVID.
Sure.
We've seen them do that. Uh, but I think the lateness of it, that so many of these guys, I mean, if you go back last year's class, for example, now Cam Ward was a guy they had recruited for a while, meaning that they were in touch with him, they were interested in him, but they didn't offer him until I believe his AAU season was underway. But Jordan Scott was a guy they'd been working for years,
Yeah.
you know. And you go back to the class prior, Jeremy Fears and Xavier Booker were guys I mean, Jeremy Fears, they had a commitment from him as a junior in high school.
Hmm.
So that's been the norm. The norm is Michigan State tends to have long-standing recruitments, and it's not accurate to say they haven't had long-standing recruitments with these guys because Avent, for example, is a kid they've been actively recruiting for a year and a half, but they didn't offer him until AAU season was underway. That's the part that's unusual,
Yeah.
I think. And I think it's played well because to their benefit that they've stayed flexible because as we just talked about, there were a lot of names on Michigan State's list the last couple of years in this class. Stephen Reynolds was a guy we heard about for a couple of years. The kid from suburban Chicago, Gabe Sularski, another kid that had made multiple visits to MSU, had been firmly on their radar. They just didn't develop the way that had been anticipated, apparently.
Right.
At least that's MSU's perception. But I would say that the way those recruitments seem to be going, that seems to be the consensus generally. So staying flexible has paid off for them, and so it's worth highlighting and thinking about because it's just a different approach as with so many things in college basketball that are shifting and changing in recent years. We're seeing it at Michigan State, not just in the geographic distribution of players they're recruiting, but because it's truly a coast to coast group of targets. I mean, we've got guys from California, we've got guys from Boston and New York City, and in everywhere in between. So it's not just geographic though. It's even in terms of the intensity of the recruitments. It's different than we've typically seen from MSU. But as I say, Avant's a kid that I think the perception is MSU is definitely firmly in this one, but Seton Hall being, dad's school. I mean, we obviously, we just saw, might as well mention it since the last time I think we recorded. I don't know if did we talk about Mateen Cleaves Jr. getting an offer?
No, he got the
I don't
offer
think we
since
have.
we last. Yeah, I mean,
He's
we
officially
were
got
pretty
an
sure he was
offer.
to Arizona. That was like I think the thing
Right.
you thought at the
And he
time.
and he is. He's announced that
Yeah.
he's going to play at Dream City Christian, which is one of these prep schools, because Mateen Senior is now an employee of the Phoenix Suns. But He's also gotten an MSU offer, which is a very rare thing for a kid to get an offer before they played a second of their sophomore season in high
Yeah.
school. Does not happen very often. So it tells you something about how they feel about him and the
Hmm.
kind of player he is. But
And not
anyway,
just because he's Cleves' son. I think that's to be clear,
no,
right?
it's a combination of things. I think
Yeah.
that is somewhere in there for sure. But I think that the fact that he's proven to be, as he had a great spring and summer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so that's the scenario there. But again, I bring it up here because would an MSU fan be shocked if he went anywhere other than Michigan State? Absolutely. Now I'm not sure about Anthony Avant's the depth of his connection to the current Seton Hall program.
Right.
In fact, I don't even remember. The current coach is a Seton Hall alum, Shaheen Holloway. I don't recall if Anthony Avant played with him. I don't think he did. Um, so it's a little bit different. Obviously in Cleves' situation, that's the same guy who coached his dad that's
Yeah.
recruiting his son, but you still get my point. It's not crazy to think, well, the dad's alma mater is a place that's going to have a real shot, and I think they do. But if MSU were to get Julius Avent, that's a really good get. He's an undersized power forward, but as we know in the modern game, 6'7" power forward, not that unusual
Yeah.
anymore. And he really does a lot of things well. I'm really impressed with the efficiency offensively that he showed this spring and summer. So he's a guy you definitely, if you get him, you're going to feel very good about that.
Well, and I think the important thing too is, we talk about parents or, fathers who go to various schools. And I think you just don't, unless you know the situation really well, you don't know what the influence is going to be from the
Yep,
dad. Like, look at Jason
absolutely.
Richardson. You had Jason Richardson, who was very hands off. He didn't sort of dissuade him, or,
Yep.
he kind of knew the situation. Certainly he knew there's familiarity, but he wasn't pushing one way or the other. And so you don't know what his dad, maybe he did like Casino Hall, or he probably did, but so who knows sort of what he's pushing or how much influence he has, or, who knows?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's worth stating here. It's a funny thing. One of the things that makes it tougher to have for people in our situation to have a really good read on these things is because we're dealing with shorter term recruitments and we're generally speaking not dealing with Michigan kids. Like
Yeah.
I could tell you in years past, there would be, and I'm not saying this was all the time, but there would be times where I felt like I had a pretty good understanding of what was going down. And it
Right.
wasn't really as much a line from Michigan State. It was other people I knew had contacts with in, the local AAU programs or
Sure.
the high school scene, those types of things. That's just not in play for these. So I have not gotten a sense of what you just talked about, how involved his dad is and what his dad's biases may or may not be. You just assume that a guy who played at an in-state school, there might be some desire to have his son play there. That would not be crazy, but we don't know.
Yeah. And then before we go on to, well, I guess we can talk about Carlos Medlock and
Yeah,
see
let's
if I
talk
can
about
get,
him.
since now if I have the tech, no, I do not have the technology. Oh, I do. I do. Look at that. I can go backwards. So he obviously committed, like I said earlier. And the significance of September 5th, and there's a couple players we're going to talk about, is grind week. For those of you familiar with that,
That's
that's
right.
where all the former Spartans come back. And they always coincides with, it's not the first, it's probably, I think it's the second home game for Michigan State. So there's a football game. It's, September 5th. Should be really nice weather, right, in East Lansing. And so it's kind of prime time to bring a lot of these recruits in, and they, get to see not only the staff, but obviously former players, Draymond Green, those types.
Yeah, exactly. And look, this is not to say that Michigan State bats 1,000 on grind week visits, but they do pretty well generally, and for obvious reasons, because you're never going to get, it's one thing to talk about the guys you've put in the NBA. And of course, these guys there are ways where you get connected to the recruits get connected to guys and you
Right.
know but the sense I have is it's just different, and it makes sense that it would be different because you're actually, you're seeing these guys in person. They're able to talk to you, and not just talk to you about it. You're able to see in front of you the dynamic in the program that Michigan State really takes to heart. And I think, honestly, from what you see and hear, does as well or better than anyone else in the country. I
Yeah.
mean, I think North Carolina and Duke are the other two programs that you hear about that have that same level of involvement from alums, and they're around a lot. They're active. That's not typical. And I think Michigan State, and as far as I know, I don't think those schools do anything like Grind Week. I think that is my sense is that's unique. So MSU lining up guys for that particular date says some things. And Carlos Medlock, of course, who's already committed, but it's great to have him there because he can now be a recruiter. I mean, that's
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
always the idea when when a guy is first, you hope that he's the kind of guy who has the sort of personality to want to lead others to get in line behind
Yeah.
him. And we'll see about Carlos. We don't really have a full sense of where he sits in that in terms of being that kind of personality yet, but he is a point guard, and those kind of traits tend to come along with playing that position more often than say other spots. Look, he's just continued to rise in terms of his the perception of him
Right.
nationally. He's not yet a top 100 guy consensus, but that's again, I have no fear about that not changing as these rankings continue to get updated. I think On Three had him
I want to
maybe
say
somewhere in
57,
the 70s or
67.
80s.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe 72
Yeah,
or yeah. I can
I think that's short, honestly. But yeah, it all depends on, there's been there's been some interesting discussion on the Spartan Mag board with the On Three, one of the On Three national guys, who I don't think is particularly great for a lot of reasons. But one of the things that was interesting that came out of that was an admission, which sometimes you can't get those guys to do, that the basis for their rankings, the way they do them at least, is pretty much on what they perceive to be NBA potential.
yeah.
And I understand that. And further, I understand you have to pick something. You have to pick something as a guideline, if you're going to do rankings at all.
Yeah.
But to me, this is one of the reasons why rankings, even though I'm referencing them in this, they don't mean a hell of a lot to me. I've always felt rankings give you a very, very loose sense, but offers are more informative, way more informative. If you see a guy that's ranked just outside the top 100, let's say, but he's got offers from Michigan State, Purdue, Ohio State, Kansas, those types of programs, bet on his being a pretty good player. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
Draymond Green was that way. Draymond Green was not ranked that highly, but he had, Kentucky wanted him, Michigan wanted him, Michigan State wanted him. That said something. You know,
Yeah.
Denzel Valentine was that way. He was ranked in the lower echelon of the top 100, but you see what he became. So I I think you have to be careful how seriously you take that, and I do think somehow, if it were me, you have to find a way to factor in what you think a guy is actually going to do as a collegiate player. So, for example, there is a ceiling on Carlos Medlock in terms of his rankings, no matter
Yeah.
how well he plays,
Because his height is one thing,
because he's
right? Yeah.
5'11". That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. And if you're telling me that you're basing this on what you perceive, and I'm going to emphasize that word, perceive someone's pro potential to be, well, then Carlos Medlock can only go so high in your rankings, right?
Yeah.
But we also know it's entirely possible that I mean, look at Cassius Winston. Now, Cassius Winston actually did get ranked in the low 30s, I believe. But he was pretty much at the max of what he could be ranked when you're
Right.
doing it based on those parameters, right? Within those parameters, right? Um, and that's because he wasn't big and he wasn't a very good athlete. So, you know, we see what kind of career Cassius Winston had. And it wasn't a surprise. I remember talking to somebody, just as an aside, in that recruit, if you remember, he and Miles Bridges, I think, committed within a week of each other, something like that. It was very close, and it sort of seemed coordinated because, of course, they were buddies. They had played AAU together, etc.
Right. Right.
But I remember having a conversation with somebody around, not on the staff, but somebody close to the program, let's say, who made the point, said Miles is obviously the better pro prospect, but Cassius Winston's going to mean a lot more to this program.
Right.
I think that's true. I think that's no slight on Miles, but at the time, people thought Miles was going to play 1 year, not two.
Yeah.
But even so, even with 2 years compared to Cassius's four, I don't think there's a person out there that would say Cassius Winston didn't have a bigger impact on the program. So it wasn't a surprise. I remember feeling that way at the time because you figured they're going to get 4 years out of Cash. And if he's the player
Exactly.
we think he is, that's going to be four pretty high level seasons of basketball at the point. So when you're looking at Carlos Medlock, and if you see, yeah, I thought he might get maybe barely into the top 50, and he might before it's all said and done. But even that doesn't necessarily tell the story. He has had an amazing 12 months of basketball. He took his team to the Class A state championship game in this state,
Hmm.
somewhere I don't believe they'd ever been. Then he goes at AAU. He's one of the top five scorers on the Adidas circuit. Um, he's done everything you could ask a player to do. And when you watch the stuff that's out there, the clips of him, you understand why he all of a sudden started getting a ton of high major offers. It's because he could play. He could really play. Just to use as an example, MSU had been recruiting John Sanderson, who had been a Michigan kid until last year. His dad, of course, a strength coach, and he moved to
Right.
Nashville. And then I think he's playing at LaLue this year. But anyway, he ended up committing, no surprise, to Notre Dame, which is where his dad works now. Uh, there's no way in hell I would take and John Sanderson's ranked ahead of Carlos Medlock right now. There's
Uh-huh.
no way in hell I would take. I wasn't sold on John Sanderson objectively, without a comparison to anybody. There's no way I'd take him ahead of Carlos Medlock. No chance. So MSU fans should feel very, very good about him as the first recruit. I think it's cool that he's going to be there for grind week, and hopefully he's got a little bit of Pied Piper in him. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. And I'm certain that part of his commitment was like, you just don't mind if I still come to grind week, right? Because I'm sure that's something these players, want to experience and meet those players. Uh,
But we've talked about it at some of our interviews. I can't remember whether it was both of them, but when we talked to Trey Fort and Divine
yeah,
Ugachukwu,
they're both excited about it, weren't
they were
they? Yeah.
both like, we asked them if they knew about it. Yeah, we've heard about it. Can't wait.
Yeah.
So I think the same thing applies to recruits.
I mean, how often you get to meet like your idols, guys you watch playing, growing up
Right,
and stuff like, not very often. So it's pretty cool. And to hang out with them, not just to shake
right,
their hand or something.
right.
So that just reminds me too, a great place to get that estimate, shake the hand of a guy who's going to do a good job is the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. Troy and his team will take care of your house. They'll power wash it. They'll wash the windows. They can do the inside, the outside, whatever needs to be done. They'll do it all. They do fantastic work. They're great people, great pricing. And the great thing is being a listener to the show, you get 10% off. You just mentioned Final Four and you get your get your estimate. You can do that at our support page, of course, at tffinots.com/support. Have them do all the cleaning so you don't have to do it this summer. You can do, or as we get into approaching fall, so you can do something else more fun, which is basically about anything besides cleaning your house, as Rod would know since he's moving to a new house.
Yeah.
So moving on then. We already talked about Julius Avent. So the next would be Josiah Jervis. He's a 6'5" wing from New York. He's also going to be there at Grind Week on the 5th.
Yeah, and there's another guy who had himself a really, really strong AAU season. Averaged 17 points and almost 5 rebounds a game in EYBL. Shot 43, 33, 64. He's a top 30 guy consensus in the class, so he's highly regarded. Good athlete, and he's a guy stylistically who's wired to score, and they believe has the potential to improve his efficiency. I mean, the 33% from three doesn't worry me too much. I mean, those numbers come and go there, and it's true, by the way. I have to say, in both directions. If you're talking about a guy who, like Avent, for example, who had a great year in terms of efficiency, that doesn't make it a lock that he's going to shoot at that level his freshman year of college.
Sure.
But Jervis is a guy that's really seen as this is a guy who's going to be a go-to type of scorer. That's the perception of him on the wing. Good size, again, at 6'5". And they also think that he's got the potential to be a solid defensive player and maybe even has a little bit of secondary playmaking in him. So could be a versatile guy for them, for whoever gets him. I think defensively the issue there, he's going to need to add strength. He's not big enough yet to where you'd feel super comfortable with where he's at, but he's got time. Believe he's listed about 175, so probably would want to add, at least a good 20 pounds or so of good weight to that frame. So the visits, besides Michigan State, it's an interesting list. So he's visiting NC State, Northwestern, Rutgers, Tennessee, and Illinois.
That is an eclectic group of teams.
It is.
There's no
because
consistent thread that moves between them.
So Tennessee and Illinois, established programs that have done some winning. NC State, strong ass new coach in Will Wade. And then you got Northwestern and Rutgers. And this is a kid from New York City, from the Bronx. So it's interesting.
Is it academics kind of drawing to those? I mean,
yeah, maybe. I don't know if it scans that way exactly. I mean, for Northwestern it might be, but
yeah,
you're not seeing Vandy and Stanford on that list.
No, that's true. That's true.
Or Duke, or
Yeah. Right.
The perception right now is that it's Michigan State and North Carolina State at the top here. So, and that makes some sense. Illinois is a relative newcomer to the recruitment. So, we'll see if they get in. I know he's going to visit there, but we'll see if they actually, become a real factor in this thing. But the perception at the moment is it's Michigan State and NC State. I think it's a really good thing that he's coming in for Grind Week. I think this is a kid, I would say he's probably their number one target as a pure wing. And you want him there in the best possible situation to give him the right kind of impression, So one that definitely Michigan State feels good about, and we'll see what happens, but definitely a name to keep in mind and to watch.
All right, so the final player coming in on Grind Day, or Grind Week, I guess I should say, on September 5th is Quinn Costello. He's a 6'10" power forward, and he's on a lot of lists for a lot of teams.
Yeah. Another guy that absolutely exploded this spring and summer.
Yeah.
He seemed to get a lot of mileage, and there are usually a few guys every year where you see this, where they go to a couple of these higher profile camps and just their profile explodes. Actually, that's what happened to Jackson Kohler. Jackson Kohler went to the Pangos camp and just killed it. And Michigan State offered shortly after that, and he ended up, of course, committing here. Costello was really good at the Pangos camp and the NBA PA Top 100 camp, and that led to a strain. He was more of a mid-major plus or the very low end of the high majors
Hmm.
kind of recruit prior to that, and then all of a sudden it exploded. So um, he's been a little cagey with announcing the visits. It has been reported multiple places that he will be at Michigan State for Grind Week. That I guess is not technically official yet, but we're assuming that's what happens. What we do know is this coming weekend he's going to be at Purdue. He's also planning on visiting Michigan, Minnesota, North Carolina, and Texas, in addition to MSU. But, and this is interesting for a kid from Boston, it's seen as a Michigan State Michigan battle.
Yeah, that is it.
I'm not sure why. Just that's the way it seems to have evolved. Um, Costello is a I would say this. This is my perception of him. I think that he has the potential to make an impact early, but more than some of these other guys, I think he's a projection work. And the reason I say that is he's 6'10, but he's listed at like 195. I'm not even
Yeah.
sure if I believe that. He's really thin, really thin. And and yet with that size, with that height, comes a very impressive set of ball skills. And I don't just mean shooting. They think the perception is he's a really good perimeter shooter, but it's not just that. I've seen clips of him facing people up and going off the dribble. And this is not like, Xavier Booker used to have people when he was being recruited talk about how, he could go end to end. And he could.
Hmm.
It was not like this. This kid looks, it is smooth movement. It's you would think you're looking at someone who's several inches shorter.
Hmm.
And
Interesting.
so you add that up, and I think it's fair to say, hey, if you get, 20, 30 pounds on him, you could have something pretty incredible with the rest of his skill set and the fact that he's 6'10. I do wonder early about the defensive end just because of the lack of strength. That I think is going to be a challenge, but who knows? Maybe over the next 12 months he's able to make real progress there, and it's not an issue.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's got some time to try and put some weight on.
There
Although it does
there
seem like these kids
does
take a little bit longer oftentimes.
yeah there does seem to be something of a perception out there that Michigan may have the lead in this one, but I know Michigan State feels good about their standing with him. I know that they are very, very serious about him as a recruit. He is unlike anybody they've ever landed. I could say that. I mean, they've never had, we talk about guys like Jaron Jackson or Xavier Booker. Marcus Bainham used to get some of that talk where, oh, he's 6'11, but he can shoot threes. That's true here too, but it's not just that. He's legitimately got ball skills. Like you could look at his offensive game and say that guy could probably play the three. And
Wow.
they've never had anybody like that. Not to my knowledge, as I think back. Not at his size. So he's a very intriguing player. Again, I think the fact that they want him in on Grind Week, we think he's going to visit for Grind Week, that is telling. It's telling about how seriously they feel about him. So again, Michigan State. It was a Michigan State thing for Medlock. That went the right way. We'll see about this one.
And to answer the obvious question, no, he is of no relation to Matt Costello,
Correct. If that
former
were the
Spartan
case,
too.
I think this would already be over.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. And so that's just a quick reminder that if you need Spartan gear and it's getting time, it's fall, it's time to get your football stuff in order, maybe hockey, basketball, head on over to Nudge Printing. There's no better place to get stuff. You can get our logoed stuff. If you want to head over to nudgeprinting.com/TFFI/TS, you can certainly get like a t-shirt or hoodie for our stuff or a little sticker. They print not only great apparel, comfortable, but also all kinds of stickers and stuff if you want, like to put on your car, computer, whatever it might be, get for your kid to go into school, whatever it might be. They've got so much stuff at Nudge Printing. I just recommend you head on over there. They're based in Portland, Michigan, so they're Michigan based. Great Spartan alums. They also have other schools there too if you want to check through their stuff. A couple other Big Ten schools, which we won't mention at this point. But go on over to nudgeprinting.com. If you type in Final Four as one word at checkout, listen to the show, get 20% off your order. All right, so the next one we'll talk about is Maximo Adams. He's visiting on September 11th. He's a 6'7" forward from California, Chatsworth, California, which I have no idea where that is. I assume it's.
Oh, I'm going to tell you where Chatsworth, California is.
Uh-oh. Do you know?
I've been to Chatsworth,
You've
California.
been to Chatsworth, California?
I have. And I'll tell you the reason why. This was just about a year ago. It was last September. And I took a Charles Manson tour.
Oh.
And Chatsworth is where Spawn Ranch was. If anybody listening remembers that, where the family kind of decamped to, where they were living before the horrible murders were committed. That is in Chatsworth. And what's interesting about Chatsworth is at that, again, if you know anything about that story, you know that Spawn Ranch, where they were living, was this place that they used to shoot Westerns in, say, the 30s and 40s and 50s, but it had fallen into disuse. But the sense you have is that it's a very rural area. It's a ranch, after all, right?
Uh-huh.
And it was that way then. It's not now. It's very the ranch is totally overgrown. I mean, you wouldn't even know. You have to be told that's where it was.
Yeah, sure.
But there's a real city there. It's like everything else. Urban sprawl has gotten to Chatsworth. So I have been there. I know where Maximo's home turf is.
That's a serious recruiting trip there, yeah.
Anyway, this is a guy, and I know I keep saying the same thing, but it's true with so many of these guys. Really exploded during this AAU season. And he's currently the number 29 consensus recruit in the nation. Just a massive year playing on the EYBL circuit. He averaged 19 points and 10.2 rebounds a game, both of which were among the top 5 in the entire field. So all EYBL, he was the top 5 in scoring and rebounding. Very impressive. He shot 51, 40, 86. So efficiency was also not an issue for him. Just a great combination of skill set, athletic ability, and toughness. I mean, he's a guy that if you watch clips of him playing, you can understand why Tom Izzo was interested. It's not hard to see it. I would say he's likely a wing, but you could see him hanging as a small ball 4 if it was necessary because of his physicality and his mindset. And so obviously a guy that is very, very much desired by major programs. This is the epitome of a big boy recruitment. So here are the visits besides MSU: Kentucky, Kansas, Texas, North Carolina, and Duke. I mean, not many missing from that list, right?
No.
Maybe UCLA. That's about it. Connecticut. It's a heavy duty recruitment. The good news is, well, I think there's two things there. One is that you can make an assumption from the fact that there's the school that's furthest west is Texas. So proximity to home is not an issue here. That seems obvious.
Okay. Sure.
So that's good. I think another thing is that most of this interest, none of these schools have a big head start on Michigan State. Michigan State didn't offer them until July, I believe. But nobody's got a big, or maybe it was late June, but nobody's got a big lead on him because that's where everybody kind of offered him, was in that period.
Uh-huh.
There doesn't, from what I can tell, there doesn't seem to be a clear leader. So I think if you're MSU, you feel good about it. That's all you want. You want a real opportunity to make an impression on the visit, and then you see what happens. But he would probably be, if I had to pick a guy to make an immediate early impact, like right out of the chute, be like not necessarily to the same level, but maybe like a Jace Richardson style impact as a freshman. it would probably be a close call between Adams and Jervis. Those would be the two guys.
Yeah, and the thing I like about all these names were these are not like second fiddle sort of recruits. These are some pretty big guys coming in to
Oh, in
Michigan
terms
State's
of the
got a
rankings?
chance. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, I mean
exactly.
it's for official visits. So what would you? I guess you mentioned that the sort of the proximity is obviously not a big deal for him, but I
Doesn't look
feel
to be.
like there are a lot of Michigan State fans. Of course, anytime you see Kansas and Duke in the same recruitment, you're kind of like we've seen this movie 100 times.
Yeah,
But it's easy. I guess I was just going to say, and I'm sure you agree with this, that we often say that, but it's also there are only so many spots that are offered. There are only so many possibilities. So it's not like it happens all the time. It just happened a couple times.
and the other thing is that I don't have a firm grip, to be honest with you, on the recruiting boards for those programs,
Sure. Yeah,
who
where he
else
is on
they're
their board too.
recruiting.
Yeah.
So that can be a factor. Uh, and and I think, yeah, it's well, for one thing, we're now at a point where the things you're worried about with some of those programs, at least, are at least theoretically no longer an issue, right?
Right.
So you don't have to worry about the Kansas bagman thing, you know? So I think the playing field is perhaps a little more even in that
Mm-hmm.
regard than it used to be. So no, I feel good. I feel good about Michigan State getting a turn at bat with all of these guys. Um, I think that's all you can ask for. And as you say, it's across the board. We're talking about some guys who, at least in terms of how they're viewed by the recruiting industry as such, are very highly regarded. So, you know, if you're only going to get two more guys besides Carlos Medlock, which is kind of where I expect them to end up, maybe they might have four. But
Yeah.
you could take your pick of this group, and I probably feel pretty good about any two guys.
Yeah. Well, that's a good place to be for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about the next guy. Is a name that will seem familiar to lots of Michigan State fans. Tristan Reed, 6'9" center from Missouri. Obviously, the younger brother of
Terrace.
Terrace. Thank you.
Terrace.
I just like it's a T name. Boy, the age is killing me here. I think the interesting thing too is we see a couple centers. We'll see another one in a little bit. Guys who are, obviously losing Jackson Kohler, going to lose Carson Cooper this year, and you're just going to be left with Jesse McCullough. Clearly, this is going to be an emphasis to at least land one of these freshmen, and then I suppose possibility of a transfer or something like that. This 5 spot.
Well, I definitely think that. One thing that should be mentioned: this class in general is not viewed as a particularly strong one nationally, and especially in terms of big man quality. Not a lot of guys that, and I think that's partially why, even though you can see Michigan State likely, now we don't know what's going to happen with eligibility rules. Who knows? We could have
Mm-hmm.
Carson Cooper and Jackson Kohler able to play another year. I don't rule that out. But let's assume that they're gone. Well, Michigan State's got an obvious need there, right?
Yeah. Right.
But you're only going to take guys that you think can actually play, can actually help you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there just aren't a lot. There were a couple of other guys. One other guy in particular that was a smaller 5-man type that they recruited, but just didn't get the kind of reciprocal interest, I think, that they were hoping for. So he's out. But there are two, as you mentioned, that they're getting visits from. And a couple interesting things. One is these two guys, Tristan Reed and Ethan Taylor, who we'll talk about in a second, were teammates on MoCan Elite in the EYBL. So they were AAU teammates. They're also going to be teammates at Link Academy in Missouri next year. And you know who else plays for Link Academy next year? Carlos
Let me
Medlock.
guess. Carlos Medlock. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Now, the unfortunate thing is they're probably going to make their decisions before they start playing.
Yeah.
So I don't know how important Carlos Medlock being there really is to these recruitments, but it is just interesting to note. And boy, if Michigan State somehow gets one of these guys, I don't think they get both, but if they got one of them, that would definitely be a team people would be paying attention to next year with Medlock and one of these guys. Talking specifically about Reed, it's interesting. We talked about how the rankings tend to be based on NBA projection, draft projection, right?
Yep.
Reed is the number 96 consensus recruit in the nation. But I think if you were looking at him through a different lens, in terms of what is this guy likely going to be able to do in college, he'd probably be higher. I think the fact that he's only 6'9",
Yeah.
and he's got good footwork, but he's not an eye-popping athlete at all. I think those things hurt him. He's not what you would look at as a projectable NBA center, but I think he's got a chance to be a pretty good college center, much as his older brother is. Played pretty well for Mocan this spring. 10.2 points, 6 rebounds a game to go with 2 block shots a game. So, he gives you all those things that you want if you're MSU at the position, or at least the primary things. He can defend, and not just in the low post. He can also move his feet, and he can rebound. And he has a high motor as well. So those are all things that make sense as to why Michigan State is interested in him. It's MSU had to battle, at least that's my perception, to get an official from him, because he had an initial list of Missouri, Ohio State, and Mississippi State that MSU wasn't on. And then recently, like within the last couple of weeks, I believe, MSU got an official with him. So I don't know what that says. I know how I interpret it, which is that they're probably fighting from behind a little bit here. The perception I've understood is that Missouri kind of is expected to be the team to beat here. But you never know. And you're getting him on campus, which is good. And Sadie Washington, it needs to be said, has a relationship with the family. He was the primary recruiter for his older brother, who picked Michigan, where Sadie was coaching. So you never know. But I'm glad they're getting a visit, because it would be helpful if they land a big man in this class. And they've only got 2 options as it stands. Otherwise, I think next year you're probably going in looking for 2 bigs in the portal.
Yeah. And that's not going to be easy.
That's challenging. I mean, it is challenging. You can do it, but it's challenging. And what kind of bigs, I think, depends in part upon what we see from Jesse McCullough this year, because I think there's a possibility that you could end up seeing him as more of a 4 than a 5. If he does look good at the 5, and you think he can handle that at least part-time, then that might mean you could get a different type of additional big in the portal.
Exactly. Yeah.
But we'll see. But I think for now, it would be great to land a high school center. I don't know if they're going to do it, but they're giving it a shot.
I'm not sure if I mentioned, but his planned visit is September 20th, so near the end of September. Then we have another center, 7-footer Ethan Taylor, who's scheduled to visit on October 3rd. He is in Kansas.
Yeah, and again, teammate, both AAU and high school, of Tristan Reed, and now in high school, at least at Link, CJ Medlock. It's interesting. I'm going to run these numbers down for you, and it's a perfect illustration of what we're talking about when it comes to what informs rankings, particularly, I think, among big men, probably among big men as much as any other position. Remember, we just got done talking about Tristan Reed. 10 points, 6 boards, 2 blocks. Pretty good numbers. Taylor averaged 9 points, 9 rebounds, and a little bit over a block per game in EYBL. Pretty similar, right?
Yep.
But he's 7'1", 230, and pretty athletic. So guess where he's ranked?
Top 20.
Number 19, exactly.
There you go.
Very good. Number 19. He is seen to have serious upside because of that, because he's starting to grow into his frame. I will say, 230, that's helpful that he's
Yeah.
already 230. So that means you're not looking at like a Xavier Booker problem. Um, as I say, this is often the case with bigs. There's clearly some projection going on here, but there's no denying the tools. He shot 75% from the floor in EYBL. So that's a lot of dunks and layups. But that's good. That's what you want a big man to do, right?
Yeah.
And they think he can be very good defensively. He's athletic. So, again, a big man that you could see fitting into what Michigan State wants out of their bigs. Not going to be a guy you have to play drop coverage with. Um, Pretty intense recruitment here as well in terms of the other schools. But the encouraging thing here is MSU got in relatively late, as did a couple of the other schools in this recruitment, and they immediately made his top six and got a visit scheduled. So that suggests that there's real interest. He's going to be
Yeah.
visiting Kentucky, who came in right about the same time MSU did. Then Oregon, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Indiana will also get visits. Those schools have all been recruiting him a little longer. But I think that if you're MSU, again, there's no downside. This is a kid who projects as somebody who can at least play a role early. And maybe is even better than that if his development really accelerates. And you can never, I think that's very tough to predict with big men.
Yeah.
But the raw material is there. His frame looks like it would allow him to play some early minutes. You just don't know how much of an impact he'd be able to make right away. But it would be exciting to get someone like him. And I think Michigan State's got a shot. I've seen nothing that suggests that there's a definitive leader in this recruitment.
Well, one thing that's not exciting is cleaning your gutters. So make sure you have someone else do that. Talk to the brothers who adjust your gutters, whether you're on the east side or the west side of the state. Greg and Kurt, they can take care of you. You can find ways to contact them at our support page at tffinots.com/support or the Final Four is on the schedule.com/support. If you mention Final Four when you get your estimate, you get 10% off your gutter work. Now, that could be just cleaning them out. It can be replacing them, repairing, whatever you need done. They can take care of it. They can put the leaf guards on so you don't have to take care of the leaves this fall, which is huge. You can stay off the ladder and do something fun, which is basically anything but put your hand in a gutter. Rod already had them take care of his house, his previous house. So I don't know, I don't know how your gutter situation is now. Hopefully, the people who buying your house are going to appreciate the gutter work that you did earlier. But anyway, head on over to our support page. Contact the brothers Adjust Your Gutters. They'll take good care of you. That brings us to our last player on our list, which is Jaylen Collingwood. He's a 6'7" combo forward from DC, and his plan is also October 3rd for visiting East Lansing.
And he's, other than Medlock, who I think we can be reasonably assured that will change for him, he's the only guy we've talked about who isn't a consensus top 100 guy. And again, a lot of these guys are consensus top 50s. Mm-hmm. So he's an outlier in that respect. And kind of a guy, again, late interest from Michigan State, and they jump kind of to the perception is at least to the top of the queue. Very athletic, 6'6", 200, probably more of a wing than anything else, from Washington, D.C. And another guy, though, despite the fact that his rankings haven't exploded as much as some of these other guys, when you look at the offer list, it's clearly picked up steam as spring has wore into the summer. In addition to MSU, he's got visits scheduled Mississippi State, Ohio State, Maryland, Butler, Texas Tech, and Vandy. Again, this is just a perception. Don't take it to the bank. But the sense I've gotten is that he may be MSU's for the taking if they want to go in his direction. And if that's true, it would kind of make sense that he's the last of these visits.
Sure.
Because then you've had guys like Adams and Jervis in, who more or less might fill a similar slot. And so you probably got a better sense at that point of where you sit in those recruitments. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think, like you said, I think you're generally, they have an idea either where you get commitments at that visit, or you have a really good idea where you stand and whether you can need to move on and go somewhere another direction.
Yep.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the recruiting update for now. It seems like every time we do these things change
Yeah.
pretty significantly.
I think
Where
we're I'm not going to say that it's impossible that they could add another another visit or two, but honestly, um, probably unlikely. At least in the fall. You know, maybe you might see somebody that you want to bring in the spring, but I think this is probably going to be your list. It's these guys, these 8 guys.
yeah. And just as a reminder, we are starting Big Ten previews. There are 18 teams. Now, one of them is extra special, so we do a longer episode for that, for deep dive into Michigan State. But the other 18, we start in reverse order. We go from 18 all the way down to number one. And that spans the next month and a half as we start end of August to get through all those teams. What Rod projects is the final standings 1 through 18, which means you, dear listener, have an opportunity to beat Rod in the Beat Rod contest. All you have to do is email me your list of who you think is going to be tops and bottoms in the Big Ten, 1 through 18. Send those lists to me. Whoever's closest wins a prize from Nudge Printing. Also, as a tiebreaker, make sure you just add how many points you think Michigan State will score against Michigan. And we had to use a tiebreaker last year, so it actually does matter. So make sure you have that tiebreaker in place. You have until the first Big Ten game, which is December something or other. They're probably like the 8th or something like that. I'm not sure, 10th. So you have until then. Rod, of course, has to somehow project these things in summer, and that's his excuse. So send those in to me, Eric at tffinots.com. And also, as a reminder, if you head over to YouTube, make sure you subscribe. If you've not done so on your podcast player, do that as well. Make sure you get notifications so you know when we go live, especially as we get into the season. We have our post-game shows. We'll have those planned, have post-game shows live afterwards, where reactions for the game. If it's an away game, you usually get an immediate reaction. If it's a home game, I've got to drive home. So once they get back, then we'll have to go live. So then make sure you head on over. Also, if you want to become a supporter of the show, head on over to our support page, tffinots.com/support. You can support us on Patreon or Substack. There you can find ways to support the show financially, which allows you also an ad-free version of the show if you want, and sometimes early access. So some of people are getting access already to the Big Ten previews. So you have a head start on who's going to be number 18 in Rod's list. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go green.